So we've talked about frontier Islam. We talked about how it's different from maybe city Islam, but I want to talk about something called antinomianism. Antinomianism is a type of religious outlook that was particularly attractive in Anatolia and in Iran, say between 1200 and 1500, and found its way into the world of the frontier quite easily. Now, what does antinomianism mean? Literally, it just means being against the law. So anti is against, nomos is law. Antinomianism is a sort of belief that the whole point of laws is that they're meant to be broken, and that actually, as a pious Muslim, you can get closer to God by purposefully trying to offend and to break societal norms and religious beliefs. So, if Islam says don't drink, or according to the law, then you should drink heavily, or you should run around naked, or you should do everything possible. It is to, in a sense, offend people. In a sense, it's a form of social deviance that is a mark of asceticism. So it's a mark of rejecting the world and its official forms of probity and propriety, right? So antinomians want to reject good behavior and religious and kind of traditional legal religious behavior as signs of hypocrisy, which keep you away from being close to God. And it was, again, a very popular movement throughout the Middle East between around 1250 to 1500. There are actually a lot of visual depictions of antinomians at the time, in both Persian albums and similar ones that ended up in European paintings, right? And we already saw one before when we were speaking about Jalaluddin Rumi. If we looked at the previous slide, we can actually see we saw the person dressed in a very similar way, barefoot with furs or animal skins and a kind of odd conical hat. But more often what you would get is essentially someone dressed often completely naked with just a sort of animal skin wrapped around his groin, carrying different accoutrements of Sufism, perhaps a begging bowl, the so-called kashkul, a big stick, or some sort of weapon. And then he would kind of distort his body. And these were all men, by the way. So you would have big piercings on your penis or elsewhere, piercings almost everywhere. And you can see this here where they basically gauged their ears in different ways. Also shaved their head. They're walking around without a turban, without any head covering, which was highly unusual, highly inappropriate at the time, right? Everyone came in with a head covering. So let's look at what exactly that was described as. This is a figure called Barak Baba. So Baba means father, a holy man in a sense. Barak was his name. This is a figure, he said, arrived in Syria in the year 1306 at the head of a group of about 100 dervishes, 100 Sufis, naked except for a red cloth wrapped around his waist. He wore a reddish turban on his head with a buffalo horn attached on either side. His hair and mustache were long, while his beard was clean shaven. So he kept off the beard, which is another sign of kind of formal masculinity. He carried with him a long pipe or a horn, as well as a dervish bowl. So he had his begging bowl. He did not accumulate any wealth, right? So he had no earthly possessions. His disciples were all similar appearance. They carried long clubs, tambourines, drums, bells, painted ankle bones with molar teeth attached to the strings suspended from their necks. Whenever they went, the disciples played, and Barak Baba danced like a bear and sang like a monkey. It's reported that Barak Baba had control over wild animals, as he demonstrated by scaring a ferocious tiger or riding a wild ostrich on 2 different occasions. So keep in mind, the Middle East back then had tigers and cheetahs and ostriches and lions, animals that are now extinct in that area. Apparently exercised similar to control over his disciples, whom he forced to perform the prescribed religious practices on pain of 40 blows of the bastinado. So he made them pray, and if they didn't, he would actually do the bastinado, which is when they would basically turn you over, pull out the soles of your feet, and then whip you with a bamboo cane. Nevertheless, his services were renowned for their antinomian ways, which include failure to observe the ritual fast and consumption of legally objectionable foods and drugs. In other words, they didn't fast for Ramadan. They got drunk. They did opium. They did hashish. The Mamluk sources also accuse them of belief in metempsychosis and a denial of the existence of the hereafter, while Barak himself is imputed an excessive love of Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law, which he supposedly views as his sole religious obligation. So these people have rejected almost every formal religious teaching. They purposefully do things that they're not supposed to do, and instead see kind of a love of Ali, of the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law, as the primary way of being Muslim. And this was an incredibly popular way of existing, of an Islam that exists on the frontier and that received major patronage by frontier lords, by princes, by all sorts of people. And in fact, many of these dervishes who sometimes came from quite good and notable families, people who had money, right? They weren't just poor, but they were people who had turned away from proper society to become closer to God.